Pleasure to have all of you with us here today. As some of you might know, when Mrs. Reagan attended a dinner event in the library's private quarters, and she attended many, she often felt the room temperature was too cold. She was always requesting that the fireplace in our living room be lit to warm up the room. If you are looking for any evidence that she's still with us today, she's come through for us and has heated up Simi Valley quite nicely. So no fireplace needed, and I'll try to be brief. Before we get started, there are a few special guests I want to make sure we recognize this morning. Roger Zackheim, our Reagan Institute Director. Roger. And from our Nancy Reagan Youth Fund Committee, those who truly made this day possible. Lynn Booth, Diane Moss, Barbara Thornhill, Connie Gavin, Suzanne Marks, and Gracie McGillicuddy. Thank you so much for all you've done. As many of you know, for the past year we've been celebrating the 100th birthday, the Centennial of Nancy Davis Reagan, a celebration that started last July 6th here at the Reagan Library and will conclude this coming July 6th with the issuing of a forever postage stamp in her honor. This forever stamp truly speaks to the fact that her legacy is long-lasting. It has been a busy year filled with events and programs which have highlighted her many contributions to the nation and her life of extraordinary achievements. Sorry. Today, we gather from the unveiling of a beautiful statue of Nancy Reagan, a statue which will remind our guests each and every day of her enduring legacy and her impact here at the Presidential Library that bears her husband's name. This is the first statue of Nancy Reagan all by herself. She is, of course, standing next to her husband in the first gallery of our museum, but today this honor belongs solely to her. Of course, we've asked our favorite sculptor, Chaz Fagan, from North Carolina to create the statue we'll be unveiling. He's with us today here, and we'll speak in a few minutes about the design and the creation of this piece. The bench you will see in a few minutes, where Nancy Reagan is seated, is made from Stony Creek granite, quarried in Connecticut. Now, the stone has some impressive history. It was used in the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty. It was used in many New York City landmarks, such as the Brooklyn Bridge and Grand Central Station. I say this because for those of you who knew Nancy Reagan well, you also know she loved New York. It's where she spent part of her childhood. It's where she began her acting career in a production with Yul Brynner on Broadway. As First Lady, and in the years following the White House years, she would find any excuse she could to go to New York. I know that on one trip, she stayed in a suite at the Carlisle Hotel. As a nice gesture, they had just painted the suite. However, you could still smell the paint, and they'd not taken the time to let the windows dry before closing them. One of Nancy Reagan's first acts upon arriving in a New York hotel was to throw the windows wide open. But because the paint had sealed the windows shut, she wasn't able to get them open. The Secret Service agent in the room quickly got a smirk on his face. For security reasons, there'd be no open windows in her suite, he said. I see, she said. Sorry. 5 minutes later, with the windows now wide open, she smiled and said to the agent, "See, it's the best way to hear the fun and the life of New York City." so sorry. In 1986, she was the first First Lady to ever address the UN General Assembly. During that bicentennial trip, she was asked to relight the Statue of Liberty, given the renovations to it were now complete. She insisted on not just going to the Statue of Liberty, but going up the Statue of Liberty all the way to the crown, where she was famously photographed waving out another open window. Nancy Reagan loved New York and would love that her new bench sits with such strong ties to the history of the city and the foundations of some of our nation's greatest landmarks. She was a remarkable woman and a truly great American. She was Ronald Reagan's confidant and a crucial partner, especially when it came to diplomacy. She was the love of his life. She was witty, she was warm, but took her role as First Lady very seriously. She was graceful under pressure and completely devoted to her husband. The statue we are about to unveil tells all of these stories and more. So let's get on with the program. Our first speaker has not only been the chairman of the Reagan Foundation and Institute's Board of Trustees for more than 23 years, he's personally responsible for so much to be enjoyed here at the Reagan Library, from the Air Force One, where visitors can go on board, to the Reagan Pub, where they can enjoy a pint. He's an Irishman, after all. Fred is also someone who knew Mrs. Reagan quite well, worked tirelessly for her for many years, and would not have missed this event for all the Guinness in Dublin. And although he started off as a critical member of the Reagan's White House staff, I know that Mrs. Reagan would agree he was an especially dear friend. But before Fred speaks, I'd like to ask that he and our statue sculptor, Chaz FAGAN, come up to unveil the statue.
Terrific, Chaz.
Thank you.
Really looks great.
Fred?
Oh, thanks, John. Well, John, thank you for that very kind introduction. And I just wanted, as we gather, so many people have been associated with the Reagans over so many years, to thank you for the tremendous job you've done leading this institution for the last 13 years. Every time I walk through, I see something else that just shows the fine touch that you've had on this and the way you've helped advance President Reagan's legacy. So we're all deeply grateful to you. I think John nailed it. This is definitely a Nancy Reagan day, temperature-wise. I always thought if you're in an environment where everybody is baking, then she's probably just about comfortable. But you might want to hold on to that blanket that we had, because sometimes she'll need the blanket again, Chaz. Well, what a beautiful likeness, and I know we'll hear from Chaz in a moment. It was so interesting to see how she was depicted, and it looks like next to her, Chaz put a basket with Nancy Reagan roses in it. I wasn't quite sure when I hadn't seen this whether there might be a telephone in her hand and maybe a to-do list in front of her, but I think she got all those things done. As was mentioned, this is very unusual, a statue of her alone, because as we all know, for the whole time they were together, the place she wanted to be was by President Reagan's side. And she was, never seeking the spotlight, but she was always his protector, his closest advisor and confidant, whether it was on the world stage, where he was working to change the world, or in the final stages of his life, where she gave him such incredible care. Never failing and always there for him. I think many of us here have said it, and it's well known, but it's worth saying again today, is that there could not have been a successful Ronald Reagan without Nancy Reagan. She was so fundamental to everything that he accomplished. It's fitting that she's positioned here, I believe, with her eyes looking at the library, the place where his legacy resides, the Reagan Foundation that was such an important part to both of them and their lives, and straight through on the other side of the library, the site where he now rests overlooking the Pacific Ocean. This has been the culmination, as John said, of a year-long effort to celebrate her centennial. It's something that has been done incredibly well, and I know that the group here today is largely responsible for that. And it really consists of two groups of people, people who have been financial supporters, many of whom have known the Reagans for many years and have been generous to the library and to the foundation. And we're delighted that you're here and thank you for your support. And the other part of the group, I would say, we're kind of the kids of the Reagan Revolution, who are, for the most part, grown up now, at least physically. Maturity-wise, there's still a few of us that there's doubts about. But this group came together and really did something wonderful to support her centennial. And I know it was a group effort, but I just want to point out one person, and that is Joanne Drake, who has helped organize this and has made it the success that it is. And I think many of you know, Joanne is the person who holds the most incredible record. She started working for President Reagan in 1984 and never stopped. So in nearly 4 decades of service. So thank you, Joanne. John's going to do the introduction of Chaz Fagan, but I would just say, well, two things actually. Maybe I could, I know it's hot, but your story about her tenacity in New York reminded me of one I think some people here may have heard. It kind of shows that it was, she was tenacious no matter where you stood in terms of the power arrangement. And one instance that was told here was John Roberts, when he became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, shortly afterwards, he came and gave his first speech at the Reagan Library, but he mentioned how that came together, that Nancy Reagan had been invited to the White House for a dinner, I believe it was for the Queen of England, during the Bush administration, after they left office, and seated next to her at the dinner was the new Chief Justice, John Roberts, and she began, like she would with a lot of people, wanting to make sure the library was an important point for conversation. She started off by inviting him to come and speak. And he immediately explained that he wasn't going to be accepting any invitations for his first year, but that he would give it thoughtful consideration. And as the chief mentioned when he was here a month or two later, that by the end of the dinner, they were penciling in dates for his visit. So, but let me just say, Chaz Fagan, who's been the artist of the Reagan legacy, his works are in the Reagan Building in Washington, D.C. They're in London, they're in Berlin. They're in many other important locations, including here at the Presidential Library, and it's just great to see this addition to the collection, Chaz, so thank you. And now I will turn it back to John.
Thank you, Fred. Well, as Fred said, Chaz, you outdid yourself. For those of you not familiar with Chaz, he is a remarkably talented American artist who grew up in Belgium and rural Pennsylvania. We, and particularly Joanne Drake, as Fred just mentioned, have worked with him many times before in creating President Reagan of so many of the statues Fred just mentioned in the Rotunda, the Capitol, Reagan National Airport, in London at Grosvenor Square, here at the library, and most recently one in Berlin, Germany, which stands at the U.S. Embassy there. He is a thoughtful and talented artist where every detail counts. And to learn more about this really wonderful work, let's hear from Chaz himself. Chaz, if you'd come up. Thank you, Chaz.
Thank you. Thank you very much. When I think back to moments with Mrs. Reagan, all I can do is smile. And that feeling is what I wanted to capture here. I wanted her sculpture to focus that welcoming warmth to everyone coming to this beautiful place. And much like the real Nancy Reagan, her sculpture is actually larger than life. There's a terrible illusion that happens with bronze sculpture, metal. If I were to sculpt a figure at exactly life size, measure for measure, and place her out here in this big, open, beautiful space, she would look remarkably small and diminished. not exactly what I had intended for this particular piece of the glowing, commanding presence of Nancy Reagan. So she's seated, elegant as usual, of course, as the hostess welcoming visitors. But you all know, and some of you more than others, that there's a much greater depth, much more to Nancy Reagan. So, yes, she's seated. She's inviting you to join her in the open space on the bench. She's plausibly been gathering flowers, and they're actually peonies. Her favorite flowers are peonies, which she's cut, possibly, plausibly again for a table setting. And here she is as the perfect hostess. But there's more. Tucked under the corner of the basket with the flowers is a folded bronze newspaper, a testament to the other side, the other role that Mrs. Reagan played in the larger arena of the day. My mind goes to the recent book by Karen Tumulty that featured a number of these historical nuggets that showed and showcased how Mrs. Reagan, behind the scenes, offered her support to her husband in the major goals like the Cold War. And to that point, if you look carefully at the back, inside the fold of that bronze newspaper, you can see and you can touch an actual piece of the Berlin Wall. The newspaper itself tells a story, and again, trying to tell the story always. The newspaper is the Washington Post from July of 1985, and it features an article called Grace Under Pressure. And it tells a story of an unexpected time when she had to step in and step into the shoes of the president to host a large, like multi-hundred diplomatic event at the White House. He was still in the hospital, but also it was the day that she learned that he had cancer. And that was obviously why it was written and why it's a testament to her personal strength, and which is why it's there. So as you've heard and as you've noticed, I always try to, in any way I can, tell more and more of the story built into the statue. So we have the newspaper, we have the basket of flowers, we have her outfit, her clothing, her pose, her expression. But in this case, I add a little more. And on the side and back panels of the bench are words that are cut into the stone. And those words are descriptors of Nancy Reagan. So Nancy Reagan in her life with her beloved Ronnie. And they're ordered chronologically. So in theory, you've got the people coming from the gate. The very first word they would read is right here, and it's partner. The next one as you go around is First Lady. The next one is bridge builder, and then protector. And the last on the panel at the far side, so the last descriptor of Nancy Reagan is caregiver. And finally, it was mentioned earlier, but there was a very happy day for me, and that was when I found out that my stone guys who helped me with this stuff found a particular block of stone from the Stony Creek quarry, and that's Stony Creek granite. And as you heard, it's a famous, iconic stone that's used for American historic places, buildings, monuments, etc. But most notably and comparable in this case is it was used to support to build the base for the Statue of Liberty. She may not be standing, she may not be holding a torch, but arguably an equally formidable lady, Nancy Reagan. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chaz. Before we conclude, I'd like to remind everyone that next week you are all invited back here to celebrate Mrs. Reagan's birthday with us, her 101st, here at the library. The day's events include a program, a birthday cake, of course, and very importantly, the first day issue of the Nancy Reagan Forever postage stamp in honor of her centennial. Speaking of the Nancy Reagan Centennial, as I noted earlier, it could not have been possible without the generous support of the Nancy Reagan Youth Fund committee members. I'd like to invite each of them now to head over to the plaque here for a ribbon cutting. And after that, we'd like to invite all of you here up to the private quarters for the luncheon we have planned. Thank you so, so much for coming.